welcome to Adam versus the Man. We have a bit of a situation this morning. Our executive producer, formerly known as Comment Jim Freedom, is MIA. Has not been heard from by anybody that we know of since yesterday's show. Not that anybody was trying to get a hold of him or expecting to hear from him until this morning. And he's got a lot going on. Wouldn't be surprised if he's sleeping in or his alarm didn't go off or something of that nature, or he's got some semi-urgent family issue he's dealing with. So not a missing persons bulletin yet, but we are running today's show with some fill-ins. CEO CJ Abernathy, the man who designed this platform, opened us up today, stepping in at the last second, and co-hosts Stephen McClure, also executive director of Homefront Battle Buddies, and co-host today, Ed Vallejo, also board of directors member of Homefront Battle Buddies, might be landing the plane today. We'll see. But we got a fun show. We got a few blocks stacked up. Today's title is The American Empire. And there's a reason that the show's titled this, not just like all of a sudden there are all these articles that go, oh my God, look, it's the Empire, and everybody's seen it. But when we say the American Empire, you got to ask, like, what is an empire? Is it an empire if we don't claim? Excuse me. Oh my gosh, I said we. Was I just identifying with the American federal government? If the American federal government doesn't claim direct tax, sovereign, governing, ruling authority is over another territory, is it really part of the empire? But that's a very narrow-minded analysis of what is the American power in the first place. To assume that it's as simple as that it's just American political sovereignty, the territory ruled or claimed by the American federal government, if that in and of itself is the power of the United States. Because in a sense, there's this geographical boundary that creates a nice enclosed area, and a psychological effect of identifying as an American. The whole thing with the border, a lot of like the insecurity. We have a story about that it's foreign nationals as opposed to Mexicans coming over the Mexican border, not just even Southerners, but people from around the world going, we can sneak in the southern border with the Mexicans and then be in the United States. And there's a certain, insecurity that a lot of Americans feel. There's a certain fear that's driving a lot of the policy of, build the wall or at least secure the border. And you ask like a question, and why do you feel, like if you live, and I'm trying to think of a geographical example where someone crosses the border and becomes further away from someone. I guess if you live in the very southern tip of Florida, of America's penis, and someone in Mexico crosses the border from Tijuana into San Diego, if they're going westward, they're in the course of that crossing, or even if they're just going straight north, I think across the border, technically they're going further away from you, but they're within this area where they can travel freely, called the United States, and now you need to be afraid of them. And there's this weird sense that this is a very important measure of how they have us as citizens of the empire, the privileged 330 million U.S. citizens who live at the seat of this empire. We have this sense of security identity as a country generally, and when someone is in that bubble, it kind of scares us, whether it's rational or not. But to the idea of the American empire, what is the actual seat of the power? It's really the money and the corporate power. And when Major General Smedley Butler, who we've seen him mention every week on the show, got out of the Marine Corps and wrote the book War is a Racket. And this was in the 30s, I think he wrote the book. Describes himself as a high-class muscle man for big business who made Central America safe for Dole Fruit Company. Do we need to take over the government directly of another country? And I say we now, like we using the voice of the powers that be. Do we need to take over militarily? I mean, was the last time the American Empire directly conquered foreign land? And some might argue with what lines I'm drawing here for criteria, but think about the conquest of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, sovereign before the American government showed up. And it might have been the last time when they could get away with it that directly. That kind of brutality, direct invasion, that kind of assault on sovereignty. And it's actually been shocking how little backlash there's been. And now a new Hawaiian independence movement is gaining steam in this era of reconsidering the history, rewriting, revising, and really rediscovering a lot of history that was buried. So it seems that since then, the American Empire has transited. Because remember, with Hawaii, sugar and trade, money and power, right? But if you can use the CIA to rig elections in foreign countries, and you can get direct control of the economic resources that you want, whether it's sugar fields, minerals, oil, labor, even cocaine, possibly marijuana. If you can get those things without direct intervention, if you can do it covertly, not only do you get more direct access to what you want, but you get less pushback. Pushback's bad for business. Violence is bad for business. Political strife is bad for business. Control is okay. Doesn't matter if we turn these third world countries into ghettos of the American empire where the real powers that be extract the resources that they want and then just rig the politics to make sure that it's good for business. Cobain Doritos and the Native Hawaiian people aren't doing too well. Yeah, well, certainly historically it's been, I mean, what was it, like 90% of the Native Hawaiian population decimated over a relatively short period of time. If you could do that before, you get away with that when you could control the communications, when you could commit such atrocities and bury them. You just can't anymore. So for today's show, we have a great American Empire block, an economics block, a block about the law. Yeah, Baltimore no longer prosecuting drug possession and prostitution. We may have a victimless crime. And I've been turning over this idea for some reason in my head. This has been just going over and over again, that there's really one police reform that sort of urgently needed, that would solve so many problems, which is to say, let's end policing as a patrol activity and make it about real police work of responding to complaints. You can do that a lot. Sort of why are we, if we had a complaint only enforcement system, no victim, no crime, if no one's complaining, or there's not a dead body, or we don't think that some complaint is being suppressed, right? That one major adjustment would get government so much more in line with the concept of the natural law, in line with the idea of no victim, no crime. Maybe it's just a fantasy, but it's sort of like what I deal with here in my neighborhood. I see, so here in Gardenia, we have a beautiful view, being on kind of a hill in the middle of the Ash Fork Bowl, so to speak, and beautiful mountain views on three sides. And running across the middle of the bowl, about 2 miles away at its closest point, and maybe 10 at its furthest across this valley, you can see the I-40. And at night, it's during the day, if you get up above the tree line, you can see the big white box trucks pretty clear. At night, it's like a ring of or string of Christmas tree lights on the horizon, just beautiful. Until you see the cherries and berries popping up, and you can see people getting pulled over on the 40. And I see people patrolling. Last time, I got pulled over on the 40. They took my license, my driver's license, so gonna have to do something about that. But don't worry, it might just be come up with the right thing to say. Don't worry, I've got plenty of right things to say. But even in Ashford, when you see cops, you don't go, oh, that's good. They're doing their job. They're responding to some crime. You go, oh man, someone's probably getting screwed. And that's what we could change that with just one change. All right, so we got an update on the law, censorship, and then a really fun grab bag. We're gonna get to all this today, one way or another, regardless of who's behind the helm, regardless of, like, as I'm just the face of this operation. Someone else actually controls this show from behind the scenes in StreamYard. So to get the promos out of the way, go to AdamVersusTheMan.com. We'll see if CJ's up on his game this early in the show. Go to AdamVersusTheMan.com. Find us on Patreon, patreon.com/AdamVersusTheMan, where $10 a month gets you our most important perk, access to the Producers Club. That's the behind-the-scenes conversation. You can hang out backstage in StreamYard, get access to our exclusive Telegram group for producers, and what else? Exclusive content there. Excuse me. Yeah, fun stuff. So please support the show. Go to Patreon or AdamVersusTheMan.com. There's a great store there that CJ put together. By the way, pretty soon he's going to be putting together another store for Homefront Battle Buddies with the same format, which has been working great. Oh, and if you're a Producers Club member, you get 15% off and free shipping from the Adam versus the Man store. So if you want to see what I was talking about in Gardenia here, don't forget to go to at the Garden of Freedom on Instagram. Fun stuff. I'm a little behind right now because we have been busting ass on the cabin, me and Pat here, and well, you can see the puppies there. Actually, CJ, why don't you click on the last meme I posted, because it's just a fun point to share. We got these two dudes, and it's the CJ. What do you call that? You want to jump on? What do you call that? The blonde with the beard or the big beard face. I don't know. I've seen it pop up in a number of things. I've seen it used, to describe like prototypical libertarian man, and I kind of like it for that. CJ, what do you think? What's that blonde, big bearded face dude mean to you?
Man, I'm all blurry again today. All right.
It looks a lot like you.
It must be the drugs. Anybody that's watching, it's just the drugs you're taking.
Yeah, no, CJ is turning into Bigfoot. That's what he's
doing. All right.
Thanks for jumping into this, CJ.
That came in as part of that whole political compass, and like they were making cartoon characters that kind of resembled, stereotypical political leaning spectrums on that political square. But hey, right. I do have good news for you. Your executive producer is backstage. So
all right, well, hold on. Before we get to him, CJ, just finish the thought on this. What is that? What else does that face mean to you? And where was it on the spectrum? Was it just libertarian?
It was in that lower southeast corner representing libertarian right.
So rightish leaning libertarian.
And then there's been various iterations of it that have evolved over time.
I don't mind reclaiming it as like neutral libertarian, because on that political chart, slightly right-leaning libertarian is they don't have a middle. I really hate the square. The diamond is so much better. The square really promotes bad misunderstandings of political ideological distribution. So if that's just but there is something there's a little bit of a hard edge or hard nose, maybe, right libertarian edge to that base. So anyway, pop that meme back up, and we'll get Jim back on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Jim Freedom is here. But pop that meme back up. So it's got those two guys standing in the field. One of them says, radishes are looking good. The other one says, yeah. And the first one goes, ever wonder what's going on in the cities? And he says, no, not really. And then underneath, there's a picture of some kind of riot with it looks like a cop car getting flipped. Yes, we are live right now. So it just makes me I posted this meme on my main Instagram and on the Gardenia one, because it speaks really well to the spirit of homesteading. if you think about the American Empire, you don't have to leave America to step away from the American Empire. You'll see how this is a very useful theme for today's show. But just stepping away from it, even within the borders, by uh, being more conscious in your lifestyle and just not supporting things that are unethical with your daily choices, whether it's paying a mortgage or rent or burning a lot of fossil fuels, uh, not growing your own food. I don't want to sound hypocritical because I'm not there yet, but being off grid for your energy use, that's a big one, for solar, for water. We got that going on here. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Comment Jim Freedom as producer, Jim, this morning. Yeah, everything okay, brother? You're just gonna rock and roll into this one?
Yeah, sorry I'm late. Happens. I've been busting my ass out here, so I don't have my headphones in. I hope you can hear me okay. See, look
Yeah, sounds fine. You got that manual labor soreness?
Be ready.
Yeah. All right.
There, my sound.
We can hear you just fine. All right. So, the only sponsor we missed here was GoGreenEnergyOnline.com. Really excited. They're going to be coming. Oh, and Cigar Federation. Thank you. GoGreenEnergyOnline.com is Jay Nygaard, and he's going to be out here this Saturday to install a wind turbine on the cabin. Really excited about that. And of course, CigarFederation.com. Promo code Adam10, 80AM10, all caps, gets you 10% off. So please check that out as well. Let's get our co-host up on screen today to announce our comment contest. Ed Vallejo, how you doing today, brother? Where are you coming from?
Commander Kokesh, PFC Vallejo reporting duty. Adam,
where are you coming from this morning?
I'm at home in Winslow on my 5-acre off-grid property, generating my own power from the sun and soon to be generating from the wind also. I spoke with Jay Nygaard, and he's bringing that second turbine out, and I believe it's going to end up on my property.
We're going to be turbine twinsies.
Hey,
wait, are you getting the purple and gold one?
I get the one you don't take.
I think there's one that's just white and then one that's purple and gold.
Yeah, one silver and one that's painted the Minnesota Vikings colors because it was on display at the Super Bowl.
That's it. Cool story there. All right, so what's your comment contest for the day?
The world is so serious. We're just full of Karens and these people that are just so uptight and just they need to loosen up and they could sure use our show once in a while because we have such a good time. We have a lot of fun. Okay. Last night I heard a great news-related joke. So that's it. The best news-related joke today. Okay. I heard. All right. What was the most washed body part of 2020?
Hands.
That's what everybody said. Brain. Yeah. I also heard another real good one, but this is a 99.97% chance you won't get it.
yeah. That came up. That one came up like everybody thought of that.
Right.
Like a week into the pandemic when the stats were all pretty. Do you remember when we were like still looking at those statistics? They don't tell us that anymore. It's not, we figured out the mortality rate. It's just cases. I mean, the change in the flavor and propaganda. Yeah, but I came up with a COVID joke.
Yeah, well, I threw that in there so that they can't try and use that in the chat.
Well, COVID is uncontained today already. We do have a couple COVID related stories, but let's keep the comments coming. Ed's going to be on them all day. So we are back up to full speed celebrating conservatism with us. I don't like Karen jokes report. I see what I think that one could be. We could workshop that one a little bit. We could workshop that one a little bit. But yes, I see what you did there. All right, our top story today. We got to get into some, and I love what Ed said. We do have uh, we do have a lot of fun on this show. I think some of the most fun that you can have covering current events. But we do have to start with some gruesome news today, unfortunately. TheSun.com. Plucked to safety, Brit ISIS massacre survivors rescued in Dunkirk-style evacuation on beach littered with headless bodies in Mozambique. Now, I got to say, credit to the authors here, or the editors, John Lockett, credit for this story, for making the story about the positive side of this, that people escaped, not that so many people were killed. But we do want to get some visuals on screen with this story. Brits caught up in the ISIS massacre in Mozambique were rescued in a terrifying Dunkirk-style evacuation from a beach littered with headless corpses. Terrified survivors have described hiding in the shadows as they waited to be picked up by boats on sands strewn with the bodies of those mercilessly slaughtered by hate-filled militants. Reports tell of desperate people trying to escape the bloodshed in Palma by cargo vessels, passenger ships, local ferries, tugs, and recreational boats. Hundreds of militants who cut phone lines before their shocking attack stormed the industrial city on Wednesday, targeting shops, banks, and a military barracks. One contractor told the BBC that many who escaped the horror hid at the beach overnight on Friday and were evacuated by boats the next morning. As he said, local suppliers and companies, these guys were heroes of the entire operation. In the wee hours, they managed to coordinate and reach out to the evacuees on the beach and got them on boats and got them into safety. Where the hell was the support from big companies, from countries? And you go, wow, yeah. And you think about the surveillance state that we live in. And so there's a reason I'm sharing this story as the American Empire, part of the American Empire bloc. And if you think about just the American global surveillance state, how many billions of dollars are spent on that, plus the Five Eyes, the five major intelligence sharing nations of the world. Yeah, they knew that this was going to happen. So not only that, there were helicopters forced to pull back from their rescue efforts after they came under fire. Like they didn't know what was happening. This is definitely a let it happen on purpose kind of attack. As Lionel Dyke, founder of South African private security company Dyke Advisory Group, which helped evacuate a number of those trapped. It was total chaos. They completely wreaked havoc. And there's no evacuation plan. Yeah, earlier we saw how a Brit was killed and 40 expats were missing after they ambushed a convoy desperately fleeing a bloody hotel siege in the African nation. Oh, wait, this was in Africa? No wonder we don't care. No, this is the American Empire using foreigners as pawns to justify spending, to scare the American people, the citizens of the empire, into massive military spending, to accepting what is an absurd security apparatus. The security apparatus, how dare I give it that credibility by calling it that? The convoy of foreign contractors was attacked by Islamic State fanatics in the north of the country, leaving at least 7 dead, say reports from the scene. The bloody ambush happened outside a hotel in Palma near Africa's biggest gas project. Dozens of people, including young children, have been slaughtered during the 5-day siege of the mining town. Others are believed to be possibly being held hostage by the ISIS insurgents. Eyewitnesses claim dead bodies, many of them beheaded, were piling up. Now, the numbers, when there aren't numbers, of course there's going to be some sensationalism to this, but that in and of itself is part of the story. Around 200 expat workers have been holed up in the Amarula Palma Hotel. The British man, who has not been named, was killed when he tried to break the siege by smashing through the rebel lines in a convoy of 17 cars. At least 40 expats, including British, French, and South African nationals, are still missing. According to a report in the Daily Telegraph, a Brit named Philip Marr has not been heard from since attempting to flee Palma on Friday. Mr. Marr, believed to be in his 50s, is understood to have been with around 200 other expatriates at the hotel. The newspaper reported he works for RA International, a Dubai-based firm that provided accommodation and other logistics for expatriate workers. So there's more. There's a very long story. But skipping ahead, town destroyed. 2 Brits were among a group who were rescued by South African mercenaries in forests in Palma. British contractors are still working at the gas site, which is operated by French company Total. During the 3 days of the attacks, banks have been looted, government buildings and vehicles have been set on fire, and much of Palma has been destroyed, a security consultant. So a lot of the headlines around this are saying ISIS takes over city, or town, and that's not an unfair description. A security consultant told the Sunday Times that the town was chaotic and with no real sign of anyone on the offensive. The insurgents are doing as they please. South African Adrian L. 40 was one of those killed in Palma. His devastated mom, Meryl Knox, said, "My son's body is still there. I know those savages would have done horrific things to him. I'm heartbroken." Her husband, Gregory, managed to make it out of Palma, though she told AFP that he had to carry the body of their dead son until he was rescued. Human Rights Watch said witnesses described, quote, bodies on the streets and residents fleeing after the fighters fired indiscriminately at people in buildings. The hotel was later burned to the ground. Helicopters carried out nonstop rescues under heavy fire yesterday. U.S. President Joe Biden has described the extremists in Mozambique as a foreign terrorist organization. Now, he starts to see, a counter-imperial narrative emerging, perhaps. And if maybe we get to the ISIS side of the story, they would say, "Oh, well, no, we only killed the responsible for the imperialism and all the other deaths and drone strikes on wedding parties and blah." Who knows? Dozens of people. There's another link here. Dozens of people, including young children, have been slaughtered during the 5-day siege. Those are the kinds of reports that often get retracted as being hyperbolic, sensationalistic. So I do want to say we are going to see this tamped down. Eventually, a better history of this episode will be written, but there's more to the story coming from Palma, Mozambique, and we are going to have more stories on this, especially as it is being used to support more foreign intervention, which brings us to our second story, the American Prospect, prospect.org. How the Pentagon accidentally funnels millions to Iraqi militia groups it's also fight. Remember, ISIS came from the ashes of Iraq, where they stole a lot of equipment that the American military, I could say we here, that the American military left behind in Iraq, and some significant chunks of cash that were in the hands of the Iraqi government, which is really, as we already knew, a puppet government of the American government. So, leaked documents reveal that the defense contractor Sallyport enriched companies connected to Iranian-backed death squads. Iraq's Balad Air Base, home of the country's F-16 program, was running out of fuel at the worst possible time. It was the spring of 2017, and the Iraqi military was preparing a final push to remove the Islamic State from Mosul, a major metropolis in the north of the country that had fallen to the extremists 3 years earlier. But fuel trucks sent from Baghdad to the American military contractor that operated the base, Sallyport Global Services, were being ambushed. Without fuel, Balad's fighter jets wouldn't be able to provide air support to Iraqi soldiers battling the terrorist group. For the coalition fighting ISIS, the fuel squeeze was a self-inflicted crisis. Today, American influence in Iraq is felt largely through powerful defense contractors like Sallyport that act as unacknowledged boots on the ground. And I just, personal note here, and I know there are a lot of vets in our audience most days who will share a little trip down memory lane with me here. But when I was in Fallujah, this is back in 2004. Holy shit, it's 2021. Yeah, 17 fucking years ago. It was all about KBR, Kellogg Browning Root, and Halliburton as the big contractors in Iraq. And you talk about the American empire, that's it. And they were the ones, sitting in air-conditioned offices, running the gyms and the chow halls and the internet cafes, and then getting huge checks for a lot of different logistic functions around that. Yeah, back to the story. These companies have a vested interest in the continuation of the war and the stealth occupation. Sallyport's leadership contains a roster of former military intelligence brass, and it has won around $2 billion in Pentagon awarded contracts at the Iraqi Air Base since 2014. American military contracts are ostensibly meant to help bring peace and democracy to Iraq and security for the United States. In reality, Pentagon spending has led to more violence. The fuel crisis at Balad is a perfect example. Sallyport's profit is contingent on maintaining control of the base and ensuring smooth functioning. This has driven the company to make deals with Iraqi politicians known for corruption. Sallyport's partners are even allegedly connected to paramilitary groups that include America's battlefield enemies and human rights violators. These types of illicit deals are a routine part of Pentagon contracts across the country, and they're valuable enough to fight over. As C.D. Moore, Chief Operating Officer of Sallyport Global Holdings, said in a statement, all of our business partners in Iraq have been fully vetted, including vetting by the U.S. Department of Defense for work at Balad. We are vigilant about and take very seriously our obligations to comply with all U.S. and host nation laws and regulations. Right. Internally, Sallyport blamed ISIS for the attacks on its trucks, but the ambushes which targeted tankers attached to the fuel trucks rather than the drivers didn't match the terrorist group's profile or its capabilities. Intelligence analysts privately believed they were part of a corporate turf war. Sallyport consultant Ginger Cruz wrote in a May 2017 email to the company, the biggest hurdles you have in getting fuel are primarily political. Cruz, a former U.S. government anti-corruption official, offered Sallyport a solution. The selection of vendors is directly tied to good business decisions. Cruz wrote in the same email. In Iraq, good business typically means breaking the rules, something Sallyport was ready to do. On Cruz's recommendation, the contractor turned to an Iraqi company, Laith al-Bawadi, to supply fuel. Laith al-Bawadi shares personnel with a complex network of multinational companies called Sigma that was previously blacklisted by Cruz's former employer, the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction, for alleged corruption. Now, I don't think we need to go more into the details of this particular case. One of the quotes here in the story, American contractors are essentially cooperating with known enemies, outsourcing corruption and military operations to a contractor is just a tool for politicians to avoid accountability for America's wars and mistakes. America's failed in Iraq because of the symbiotic relationship between the U.S. military, its contractors, including Sallyport, and its rivals, and the country's corrupt politicians and paramilitaries. The article concludes, if there were no stealth occupation, there would be no military and logistics contracts for insurgent leaders and military contractors to profit from, and no economic incentive to continue fighting Iraq would have a chance to move forward. John Smith weighs in other news. Lil Nas releases a new cryptocurrency called Bitcoin, which the artist assures has value in this life and the next. Okay, thanks for that side comment. We do have some crypto news we'll get to today. But to all of the conspiracy theories about, well, it's the State Department and it's the CIA, covertly funneling money to Iraqi contract or to ISIS, to the death squads in Iran. It doesn't even have to be that deliberate to know that it's going to happen when you put this kind of money out there with contractors this way. And it seems like if you're the sort of the real engineers of the American empire right now, and it's probably real, there are a lot of people who have roles in this, but just a handful of dudes, manipulate. It could be women too, but I'm giving the fair gender the benefit of the doubt here, just like there have been no females who have successfully stooped so low as to be president of the United States. That's something your gender should be proud of. Similarly, when I accuse men of being primarily responsible for engineering the American empire, I think that's a fair observation of a gender bias that exists in reality. Okay, so we got some gender law news coming up later as well. Okay, so for the dudes pulling the levers on the American empire, really engineering the system, do they have to make the attack in Palma happen? No. They just have to keep getting this money out there, and to them, a few billion here, there, it's not that much, and for ISIS, a few million, that's 1,000th of a billion, just a few million goes a long way could make an attack like Palma happen. How many tens, hundreds of millions of dollars are currently just out there floating around with these groups waiting to make these attacks happen with a little encouragement, a little support from the American government, or just a little bit of infiltration and let it happen on purpose, perhaps. So that's one aspect of the American empire. But since COVID is already uncontained on today's episode, we go to Becker News for our next headline. Dr. Fauci and Chinese communists caught colluding on mass vaccinations, extended lockdowns. Now, caught colluding, I'm like, wait, what's the source? Okay, Becker News, little sensationalist. They're doing this in the open. They're talking about a virtual panel with his counterpart, Anthony Fauci, longtime Chinese Communist Party member, Dr. Zhong Nanshan, which was hosted by the University of Edinburgh, posted in early March. Has gotten little attention despite the public health experts' advocacy for strict lockdowns extending 2 to 3 years in global mass vaccinations. Now, I am not shocked by this news story. Like, I'm not, oh my God, Dr. America's head COVID guy and China's head COVID guy are talking policy together in public about how much worse things could get. Duh. Right? But it is worth pointing out, this is what that other side of the story looks like, and when we analyze on Adam versus the Man, we try to look at where this is going, try to answer the bigger questions. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? This is not necessarily what they're trying to do. It's just what they're talking about publicly. Now, I'm not trying to play this down because they're raising this possibility. Like it's one of the ways that government operates. And this is like not at all conspiratorial. You see this at like, benign city council level. Like, hey, we want to put, I'm thinking Parks and Recreation, like, hey, we want to build a new park here. Let's say that it's our plan, or let's talk about it, or throw it out with a bunch of plans and see how the public react. Or, and it's this kind of manipulative thing, like, let's suggest an idea and see and present it in such a way that might be dishonest or disingenuous in order to test public opinion and get a certain reaction. And by and large, there's been little reaction to this. I think the government got what they wanted out of this, sort of test balloon, is that if they keep lockdowns, well, I should couch this in some other terms, right? Because this, saying it publicly like this, when it's Fauci and Nanshan, they are all actively trying to pull public opinion in this direction as well, right? They're trying to get the public to accept lockdowns or to think that the lockdowns that remain in the United States, or the restrictions that are mostly going, but in some ways coming and going, might be justified. And of course, for the rest of the world, there are other places where, like in Brazil, they're experiencing, another wave of COVID, and that we could get another wave of propaganda that would make people think there's another wave here in the United States at any time. And they would go, well, I guess it's time to go to that 2 to 3 year global mass vaccination strict lockdown phase that Fauci and Nanshan came up with. Remember that? Yeah, we talked. Oh, you didn't remember that? We talked about that back in March. But don't worry, you don't have to worry about it. We'll go ahead with this. So when they put this out there, they're trying to determine what they can get away with. And in the United States, in many ways, the lifting of restrictions now is because they've hit their limit of what they can get away with what they've convinced people of as of right now. So they know that in order to get to the next level of lockdowns, shutdowns, and economic manipulation, there's going to have to be another wave of propaganda. So brace yourselves. That's kind of what we're watching for. And we see that in the news in different ways. We do have some different, I kind of want, I got to tease ahead to our COVID block tomorrow. Because what they're trying to scare us with right now is that COVID can give you erectile dysfunction. And Fauci is the worst street magician. Thank you, Rob B. And this is University of Rome doctors looking at the change in fertility of 100 men. 28% of those who had COVID said they were suffering with erectile difficulties. In comparison, only 9% of those who had not had COVID experienced problems. Now, there's a really simple explanation for this. Who gets COVID? Fat people, unhealthy people, men more likely to experience erectile dysfunction anyway. But be afraid, your penis might explode or just stop working. All right, back to Taiwan now, and this is a fun story in a follow-up to the Suez Canal ship blocking. Taiwan Evergreen truck jams traffic in China. Ever struck netizens compare gridlock caused by container truck to Suez Canal obstruction, right? Because right away, and I'll just read this. Amid the global shipping crisis caused by a ship chartered by Taiwan's Evergreen Marine Corp, a truck carrying an evergreen container caused a massive traffic jam on a busy expressway in China. The Panama-flagged Evergreen, chartered by Evergreen Marine Corp and owned by Japanese firm Shoei Kisen Kaisha, became wedged sideways in the middle of the Suez Canal on March 23. At the time, as of the time of publication, the gargantuan vessel is still stuck, although it is free now. This article is from yesterday, and yesterday we covered the ship being freed. But on Saturday, March 27, traffic camera footage surfaced of a truck carrying a bright green evergreen container involved in an accident on a busy expressway in China's Jiangsu province, causing a long line of vehicles to be jam-packed. Behind us can be seen from the timestamp the photo was taken. Anyway, given the significant disruption to global supply chains caused by the Ever Given, netizens quickly shared the photo on social media, both in China and across the globe. Many pointed out that the scene appeared to be an uncanny land version of the canal conundrum, with the truck stuck at the same 45-degree angle to the right as the megaship. Chinese users of Weibo had a field day poking fun at the Taiwanese company. Now, the thing is that now one of them says this is Taiwan independence. Right now, there's a huge struggle, and this is not being really properly contextualized. But this just might be too obvious that there's some Chinese, like, because I don't have any grounds for this. I'm just saying, looking at the Ever Given incident in the Suez Canal, that had to have happened on purpose. There's so much money at stake, and keeping those major container ships from running aground that they've got underwater sonar, navigation, weather prediction. Like they say, oh, it was wind blew the no. I mean, yeah, maybe it was wind, but because they didn't account for it, why not? Had to have been made that happen on purpose. And then I see this, right? And Evergreen Group claims it does not operate a trailer truck line in China, reported China Times. And it's just the visual. It's a truck with Evergreen on it in big letters. And it's a Taiwanese company, while China has recently made huge inroads to Hong Kong and is in the process of throwing its weight against Taiwan, trying to bring Taiwan back under Chinese rule. Doesn't look like it's going to happen for a lot of reasons. I think from a distance. I mean, the Chinese government is putting a lot of effort into this, so they must think there's some reason to try, or maybe they think it's a low likelihood of success, but they have to try anyway. Who knows? But just accounting for how the world is creating a greater expectation of right to self-determination, that decentralization of government, that localization is the natural course of things. I think there's it seems highly unlikely that China is going to be able to take over Taiwan, although I was surprised that they were able to take over Hong Kong as much as they were. But again, let's connect this to the bigger narrative of COVID, shall we? Because remember the protests in Hong Kong for autonomy for Hong Kong, as China was pushing in on that. And then COVID struck, and they were able to suppress that movement and those protests and install a Beijing puppet government in Hong Kong. So if they're trying to do the same thing in Taiwan, maybe it starts with this, oh, look, Evergreen. Yeah, that Taiwanese shipping company that screwed up the Suez Canal. Oh, and then they got a truck stuck on a Chinese road. To make these two industrial accidents happen for a government would actually be relatively easy. I mean, to get the Ever Given stuck, I mean, you got one person in navigation to make. I mean, I'm sure they've got multiple people, so maybe you gotta recruit 2 people. You got to buy off 2 employees. And then the truck. It's a truck being driven in China, but it's not even an Evergreen truck company. It's just and it might not even be a container that they're using, but it's a container with Evergreen painted on it. So that's why China Times, reported, as it says here, Evergreen Group claims it does not operate a trailer truck line in China. Patrick Lewis, hey, I feel bad. Hey, Patrick from across Gardenia, I feel bad for all the people in those containers. Was that a 3-day layover? Sounds worse than a Greyhound. Yeah. So although Evergreen so the article here concludes, and this is just another indicator of the strangeness of the coincidence here, given that it fell on that brand when there's so much international ownership here. Although Evergreen is the charter, the owner and shipbuilder are Japanese. The captain and crew are Indian. The pilots are Egyptian. The operator is German. The insurer is British. The cargo is made in China. The salvors are Dutch. The ship is Panamanian. And the classification society is American. And that is actually sort of typical in international shipping. I wouldn't be surprised to see if more comes out here. Now, to the Associated Press, we go to Myanmar, and 2 stories. One from yesterday we didn't get to. Myanmar forces kill scores in deadliest day since coup, as Myanmar's military celebrated the annual Armed Forces Day holiday with a parade. Saturday, in the country's capital, soldiers and police elsewhere killed scores of people while suppressing protests in the deadliest bloodletting since last month's coup. The online news site Myanmar Now reported late Saturday that the death toll had reached 114. A count issued by an independent researcher in Yangon, who has been compiling near real-time death tolls, put the total at 107, spread over more than 24 cities and towns. That's more than the previous high on March 14, which ranged from 74 to 90. The killings quickly drew international condemnation, including a joint statement from the defense chiefs of 12 countries. It said, quote, a professional military follows international standards for conduct and is responsible for protecting, not harming the people it serves. We urge the Myanmar armed forces to cease violence and work to restore respect and credibility with the people of Myanmar that it has lost through its actions. Yeah. The European Union's delegation to Myanmar said that the 76th Myanmar Armed Forces Day will stay engraved as a day of terror and dishonor. Quote, the killing of unarmed civilians, including children, are indefensible acts. And it's interesting to see here. There is a photo with the story, and the caption is, anti-coup protesters prepare makeshift bow and arrows to confront police in Takeda Township, Yangon, Myanmar, Saturday, March 27, 2021. The head of Myanmar's junta on Saturday used the occasion of the country's Armed Forces Day to try to justify the overthrow of the elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi, as protesters marked the holiday by calling for even bigger demonstrations. So back to the let it happen on purpose, right? Did the United States let this happen on purpose? Maybe there was someone in the CIA watching this unfold who knew what was happening. And the thing is, they could have stopped it, right? You think with all the power of the government to manipulate foreign governments to bad, even if this coup was sort of organic, a military junta, as opposed, if the CIA didn't make this happen to begin with, right? The fact that they let it happen means that they wanted this to happen, and if not them, somebody. Like what things like this, when you have, and I'll say 2 global empires now, or competing, global empires, maybe in East and West with China versus the United States. Either one of those central governments, the central government of China or the central government of the United States, could have prevented this from happening. So think about it this way. If they both wanted to stop this from happening, they could have stopped it. However, if one of them wanted it to and the other one didn't, there could have been a proxy battle that both of them didn't care that much about, and did, they sent a few covert agents with money in, et cetera, or they both wanted it to happen and both helped make it happen, or one made it happen and the other let it, or it was sort of organic, or somebody else made it happen and they both let it happen. But it's time that the people of the world stop accepting this. And I think there is going to be a shift to a more humanitarian military policy that we've been expecting from the United States government since World War II, really, if not, Vietnam or the Gulf War. That, military interventions be to prevent coups, to prevent massacres, to prevent massive human suffering. And the fact that they're not being used for that, this should really tell us something, because they have that power. They absolutely do. We have given that, we, the people of China and the United States, have given our governments so much money, power, resources that we should all know that when something like this happens, at very least, one of them either made it happen or let it happen on purpose. Our next story on Myanmar from Reuters. Let's see where this goes. Outside pressure builds again on Myanmar junta as death toll tops 500. Myanmar faced growing criticism on Tuesday over surge in violence against opponents of military rule that killed more than 140 people in one day, with a new offer to help promote dialogue by neighbors alarmed by the crisis. 141 of them on Saturday, the bloodiest day of the unrest, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners Advocacy Group. Fighting has also flared in old wars between the Myanmar army and ethnic minority insurgents in frontier regions, and refugees are beginning to spill over borders. So there's a lot of potential control of bigger pawns on the chessboard with an episode like this. And you think about, remember back to the way I described what is the core of the American empire, what is the real nature of the power of the American empire. It's not just political, and it's certainly not political sovereign rule. It's a lot of shadow power. It's a lot of economic manipulation, and it's the economic power of the international corporations that really drive a lot of this policy and make things like this happen. When we say, remember that we say that there's a let it happen on purpose element to this, at least by the two great superpowers. When it's the United States letting it happen on purpose, why did the government let it happen on purpose? What would make the American government go in and intervene and prevent something like this from happening, or intervene covertly, or simply offer covert support to the good guys instead of offering support to the bad guys, which is typical of American imperialism? Well, who owns American politicians? The bankers and their corporate sponsors. And they are okay with this happening. How directly engaged are they in the minutia of the manipulation of the American empire? Who's to say? But I guarantee you the people who are watching the flow of money, who are getting paid off, are keeping that money going. Mike Freeman weighs in. Are people becoming the new commodity? That's that's an interesting way of looking at this, because if anything, the way that I have thought of human labor capital is, while increasing in value because of technology, well, shit, this gets me to the inclination to the population control people. Do they want to maximize populations, or do they want to control and exploit them? Are smaller populations more exploitable? I think that's the bigger question. They don't care about killing off 10% of the population if it means the other 90% are going to work for them 20% harder. So to Russia now, France24.com, Russian newspaper fights on despite threats and attacks. Captured on CCTV camera late last night, a man on a bicycle with food delivery backpack approaches the offices of Novaya Gazeta, Russia's leading independent newspaper. In the grainy footage recorded in central Moscow earlier this month, the man sprays an unknown substance at the newspaper's front door, then slowly walks away careful not to look up at the camera. Sitting in the offices a few days later, editor-in-chief Dmitry Muratov tells AFP has no doubt the chemical attack was the latest attempt to silence one of the few media outlets in Russia willing to challenge the official line. As he said, quote, this is the use of military-grade, non-lethal, poisonous substances to warn the paper staff or as revenge on them. Several employees felt unwell after the attack, and it took days of cleaning to get rid of the horrible stench, with the strip of pavement that was sprayed having to be removed. It was hardly the first attack on Novaya Gazeta and far from the worst. Since the early 2006, Novaya Gazeta journalists have been killed in connection with their work. Their black and white portraits now hang together in the newspaper's office. It's no secret that when they killed Anna Politkovskaya, I wanted to close this newspaper. This newspaper is dangerous for people's lives, Muratov said. Politkovskaya, who spent years reporting for the Novaya Gazeta on rights abuses in the Kremlin's war in the North Caucasus region of Chechnya, was shot dead outside her apartment in 2006 at the age of 48. As Muratov says, the newspaper's journalists were categorically against this. They believed they would violate the memory of Anna Politkovskaya if we closed down. They convinced me. So this is, the unwanted gifts is how they describe their attacks. Let's see, what are the other attacks? I'm sorry, I didn't have this marked here. In 2018, its office received an unusual delivery of a funeral wreath and several ram's heads with a note addressed to Denis Kortkov, who covers the Wagner mercenary group. His investigations have shed light on Wagner's operations abroad and on its alleged ties to a Kremlin-linked businessman. Kortkov tells AFP that despite these gifts and false articles written about him over the years, he does not plan to stop his work or leave the country. He says, wearing his signature round sunglasses and smoking a pipe, it is quite difficult to do journalism about Russia from outside Russia. If every reporter who wanted to write the truth left Russia, he says, quote, we would then have a lot of single-use journalists in Russia. You write one controversial story and then you leave. You can have a whole colony somewhere. And it makes me think about like journalists in the United States. If they're not being threatened or censored or shadow banned, then they're not really doing their job as journalists, are they? Wall Street Journal, next headline, a U.S. diplomat's wife was a social media star until Chinese trolls, aided by state media, came after her. Oh, is that how this works? Sui Chuang was referred to as the most famous diplomatic wife before she became the target of a vicious months-long attack on social media. In U.S.-China diplomatic circles, Sui Chuang was once referred to as the most famous diplomatic wife and credited with helping the U.S. score soft power points with Chinese people at a time when few others could. The wife of the former U.S. Consul General in Chengdu, Jim Mullinax, she was a popular Taiwanese-American food writer and budding musician who amassed a huge following on Chinese social media, where more than 500,000 fans followed her posts on cooking and music, even as political tensions were rising between the U.S. and China. In 2019, as the U.S. and China traded tariffs, she was named Cultural and Tourism Ambassador for Chengdu City. Then in July, Chinese social media users turned against her. They seized on a comment she had made in an earlier post, when she later said she regretted, and flooded her social media feeds with vitriol for months. The online attack on her was both encouraged by state media and unusual for how long it lasted, according to experts who study Chinese media. Telltale signatures of an intelligence operation, not organic social media activity. Ms. Chuang's transformation from celebrity to pariah offers a vivid window into rising Chinese anger at the U.S. It also highlights a challenge for the Biden administration as it builds a strategy for dealing with Beijing at a time when political tensions have eroded the diplomatic and cultural ties between the two countries. Said Drew Thompson, visiting senior research fellow at Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore, former U.S. Defense Department official. This groundswell of anger is something the new administration needs to keep in mind if it seeks to rebuild people-to-people exchanges. So it's funny this is happening, and they know that this happened. The people at the highest levels of government know that she was attacked by government-sponsored trolls for political reasons. And there's not much she can do. The article concludes China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in reply to the journal that it didn't know of Ms. Chuang's situation. Of course they didn't know. And that the State Department's comments were groundless. Oh, the statement says, sorry, backing up a paragraph. The State Department said it was aware of the instances in which Chinese state-controlled media participated in and encouraged online efforts to troll and harass U.S. citizens, U.S. diplomats, and their family members. It is a tactic used by thuggish regimes, not responsible nations. Now, they're missing a point here, which is really interesting because, like, say the United States federal government wanted to come after me in a way other than shadow banning, censorship, and legal persecution, right? Like we're already experiencing here, and instead wanted to go active again. And they wouldn't, because it would ruin the shadow banning effect. It would probably give me more promotion and have a whiplash effect in the United States. And remember, they can only use these tactics so many times before they wear thin, and everybody starts thinking about one of Ernie Hancock's favorite sayings, everything on the internet is fake. So, or I think, maybe he said, nothing on the internet is real. That's it. Nothing on the internet is real. And when, judge content for yourself rather than comments on it or other people's opinions of it. I mean, that's an important aspect of being a conscientious consumer of information. But they can use the media they could criticize me in the mainstream media, which has been done. And then, well, shit, now I think about it, this might have been done to me too, well back in the days of Iraq Veterans Against the War, perhaps in a more obvious way. But yeah, there have been times I've been criticized in American mainstream media and then seen a flood of hate online. And I'm seriously just putting this together now that I may have experienced this as well. Not as obvious, not as blatant, and maybe, I don't know. You have to look back at specific incidents. But here with Ms. Chuang, they're actually tracking this over time and going, this is not organic. We can say, with something like 99.9% certainty, this is not an organic response to the media telling people to attack someone. This has to be some kind of sponsored troll activity. That's why the duration of the attacks is such a critical part of this. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent a reply to the journal that it didn't know the situation in the States, so those are the comments that they were groundless. China has a free internet. Its users can freely express their opinions, and Chinese media is unbiased, truthful, and accurate, the ministry said. Wow, they're that blatant. Classical music. Adam has obviously been the target of government operations meant to silence him. Thank you. I appreciate that acknowledgement. Ms. Chuang said she recently resumed cooking, writing, and posting on social media. Not doing so would only mean letting the trolls win, she said. Looking back, the incident showed her how little room is left for bridge builders in U.S.-China relations. As she said, quote, China does not balk at destroying the moderates to make a complete enemy out of the United States. Now, they might even be making this story happen as the high-profile example, so that they can get away with doing the same thing to people like myself who have a message that represents a real threat to the power structure, and therefore, you don't see it. Hey, look, governments are shadow banning high-profile political figures on each other's teams. We're not doing that to the people who are threatening the whole system of government as we know it. No, of course not. All right, so next, AFP, Yahoo News, another story of censorship. Yet Thai billionaire charged with royal insult over vaccine video. A billionaire Thai opposition figure was charged Tuesday with defaming the monarchy after he questioned the government's alleged over-reliance on coronavirus vaccines from a company linked to the royal family. Thanathorn Juangrun Gruankit. I'm just covering the story because I want to say that name. I'll do it again. Thanathorn Juangrun Gruankit, founder of the now dissolved Future Forward Party. He's got to have a nickname, right? Posted a video on Facebook in January in which he queried whether Thailand was leaning too heavily on Siam Bioscience for its vaccination campaign. The company is owned by the Crown Property Bureau, which manages the royal family's multi-billion-dollar fortune. Police on Tuesday charged Thana Thorne with lèse-majesté and a computer. It's funny how even AFP, they would normally use a last name, but they're using his first name here. Police on Tuesday charged Thana Thorne with lèse-majesté and a computer crime over the video, but he was defiant. Quote, "It has had a positive result, encouraging the government to reassess the vaccine policy to manage the COVID-19 situation. There is nothing to worry about," he said after being charged. Quote, "The police did not bring up any quotes or anything that was said. Specifically, it was generally charged for speaking via Facebook. Those convicted under Thailand's strict royal defamation laws can face up to 15 years in jail per charge." Thailand, and that's one of those things, well, every sentence could be a separate charge, right? Whew. Thailand has ordered 61 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine Siam Bioscience plans to manufacture 200 million doses of that vaccine for the kingdom and wider region each year. Thana Thorne will have to report to police again. So anyway, but here's the political backstory. Before it was disbanded, his Future Forward Party was Thailand's third largest, drawing millions of supporters who were attracted to his anti-establishment platform during the 2019 election. Yeah, well, COVID has provided the cover and the excuse to level charges of lèse-majesté against Thana Thorne here. Jamie, well done. All right. Bloomberg from MSN, and this is the last in our international block. A private tech city opens for business in Honduras. So we're going to end our international block with some good news. If you're going to work remotely, Prospera is a nice place to do it. Located on Roatan, a tropical island off the coast of Honduras, it features a series of airy offices and communal outdoor spaces with ocean views. There are other real estate developments on the island, but Prospera is the only one with its own set of laws and governing system. Prospera is the first project to gain approval from Honduras to start a privately governed charter city under a national program started in 2013. It has its own constitution of sorts and a 3,500-page legal code with frameworks for political representation and the resolution of legal disputes, as well as minimum wage, higher than Honduras's, and income taxes, lower in most cases. After nearly a decade of development, the settlement will announce next week that it will begin considering applications from potential residents this summer. The first colonists will be e-residents. Prospera doesn't yet have housing ready to be occupied, but even after the site is built out, most constituents will never set foot on local soil, says Eric Brimman, its main proprietor. Instead, Brimman expects about 2/3 of Prosperans to sign up for residency in order to incorporate businesses there or take jobs with local employers while living elsewhere. For many Central Americans, Brimman says it will be an attractive alternative to the meager economic opportunities afforded elsewhere in the region, whose governments he considers to be bureaucratic and corrupt. Quote, "You can have the rule of law virtually," Brimman said. So this is really exciting. The idea behind charter cities, along with their predecessor seasteading, which sought to create independent nations floating in the ocean, is to compete for citizens through innovative, business-friendly governing systems. For some reason, the idea has long been linked to Honduras, an impoverished country whose governing system is classified as partly free by the human rights organization Freedom House. Paul Romer, an American economist who pioneered the idea of charter cities, tried to start one in the country a decade ago. It failed, but Honduras has spent much of the time since then writing a law to enable such cities, which are known in the city as ZEDES, short for Zonas de Empleo y Desarrollo Económicos, employment and economic development zones. But the prospect of creating pockets of prosperity that play by their own rules is controversial for obvious reasons. Let people live free. Oh my gosh, that's so controversial. Prospera has drawn protests from local residents who see a lack of transparency and little to gain from its existence, and a group of local political leaders signed a letter of opposition in October. Now, this is differently when you have existing land in an existing occupied land within an existing country, as opposed to become truly sovereign. So after years of debate, Prospera will be the first real-world test of a divisive libertarian idea, says Beth Giglia, an anthropologist who studies charter cities. There was a noticeable lull in the startup city movement in general until the Prospera Zede project got off the ground. It's ground zero. I don't know, maybe a lull, maybe a period of them being suppressed would be more accurate. Hacker Maria Evans recolonizing South America. No, it's sort of decolonizing the United States to create economic freedom zones. Now, there's that way of looking at it. If you want to look at it from an ethnic perspective, and it's like white dudes behind these freedom zones, and I'm thinking, did the Honduran government really work on this, or did someone write it for them? Some American lobbying group sponsored by Bremen or other entrepreneurs. But Bremen is a native of Venezuela, 37 years old, presents himself as only mildly ideological. It's not screw the state or let's be libertarians. He says it's somewhere in the middle. So it's native Venezuelan in this particular project. But in terms of decolonizing the American empire, think about what I said before. Again, what is the power of the American empire? It's not the sovereign territory so much as it is the economic and shadow power, the power of the banks, of the corporations, to selectively, carefully apply violence or hold back the application of violence in order to secure access to resources. So in this case, not only is it a Venezuelan, but what they're doing is creating an economic zone where possibly someone who might incorporate a corporation in the United States would incorporate it there, or perhaps in another place altogether where they can avoid the taxation and regulations of the United States. So with that, that's our international block. We made it an hour, 12 minutes into the show. Let's check back in with co-host Ed Vallejo before we get to we have some fun cannabis news today, unsurprisingly as well. But Ed, what else you got today?
What else do I have?
What else? What do you, I'm sorry, I should have said. Who are your? Make me laugh. I'll make it easy for you. What are your best comments for humor this morning?
For humor, basically that the one John Smith put on about the Bitcoin. That's about the only humor that I've seen roll through there. Everybody else is just rolling along with what you're saying.
Too many serious stories to start the show.
I guess they're just not in a light mood.
Well, tell us more COVID jokes.
I don't really have any. Sorry, I guess I'm just not the.
There's got to be a joke you can make in there about not having COVID.
A joke you can make about. Oh, I do have one. Who benefits most from the mask mandates? Who benefits most economically and pretty much in just about every way?
That's a good question. Who benefits most, like specifically from that part of it?
Ugly hookers.
What?
Ugly hookers.
I knew there was a good joke coming, but that's a serious question to ask, right? Because you could say, mask makers, mandate that everybody makes your product.
Classical music got it. Ugly people. Classical music got it. Ugly people.
Yeah. No, I wonder about that sometimes. People. Let's turn that around. Say who benefits the most from the mask mandate? People with very pretty eyes. Is that trying too hard to be positive? Okay, but no. Let's try to answer the question in a serious way. Who benefits the most from the mask mandates? Are there any particular mask manufacturers?
China benefits most from everything related to all the impacts. Everything. China.
Well, China being able to expand its real estate holdings into the United States as it sees the manipulation of prices. We got a story on that coming up coming up after one more fun positive story in our econ block about real estate market manipulation here in the United States. But is it the bulk of the basic medical masks that are being sold by the box and then discarded in so many irresponsible ways. Are those almost all from China?
I wasn't speaking about the sales aspects of everything related to it. I was talking about more like the more America is debilitated, the more the power of China rises. Okay, I mean America and the evil people in charge in America for a long time have been selling everything off they possibly can to line their pockets as quickly and as much as possible, and China has been buying it all up and buying it all up and buying it all up. Well, somebody's going to want to start to take possession of what they've bought and paid for. And that's the systematic process of what's going on right now. I mean, you let everybody that it doesn't belong here to flood right on in, and what's to stop the Chinese to be amongst them?
Well, because I had not asked this question directly myself. It was sort of these obvious dynamics around masks, but thinking about the bigger vaccine racket right now, do you think there's a significant? I mean, who benefits? Maybe the vaccine racket is a bigger racket. I don't know. But I suppose over a year, even a casual consumer who doesn't like masks but accepts being handed them at stores will probably spend more on masks than the vaccine. But that if you scare people into wearing masks or mandate masks and then say, well, if you buy this other product, you won't need the masks. You don't have to wear the mask if you buy my vaccine. And so it might be part of that bigger manipulation, and it's kind of subjective weighing them out. I don't know. How do you think those two?
Well, calling it a vaccine is the misnomer to begin with. Is because they say it's a vaccine, even though you and I both know it isn't. That's the biggest reason why it's accepted by the masses. I mean, if you said, no, it's not a vaccine, it's an mRNA recombinant, it's something that reprograms your system and changes you into something different, and, it's never been tried before, and, oh, by the way, it killed all the test animals we tried it on, then it might be accepted a little bit differently, you think? They want it, and they're getting what they paid for, as far as I'm seeing, and nobody's trying to stop them, because the people that they're supposed to stop them are paid for by the Chinese. I mean,
well, let's get into our econ blocks, our little good news, and cover that real estate story, which we just discovered the Chinese connection for. So next, we go to people.com for a quick feel good. Goodwill employee finds $42,000 hidden in donated sweaters, returns money to owner. I do believe that if you do something good will come back to you. Goodwill employee Andrea Lessing said after finding the money. Wow. Now I wonder, where's that? They figured out where that $42,000 originally came from, but and I hate to sound suspicious, but who's walking around with $42,000 in cash, right? Fortunately, the envelopes also had paperwork that identified who owned the cash, and the store was able to return the money, according to KFOR. Normally, we have no way of knowing who the money belongs to. Frank Holland, vice president of donated goods at the nonprofit chain, told KFOR, quote, even if we want to try to give it back to someone, there's no way to find who that person was. Lessing, a mother to a 6-year-old girl, it was hard not to think of how she could have used the money if she could have kept it. I have a daughter. I love her very much, and you can't put a price on my daughter. I know what could be risk stealing that money, and I do believe in karma. I do believe that if you do something good will come back to you. But Lessing wouldn't walk away empty-handed after all. According to KFR, the owner of the money surprised her with $1,000 from the money she found. So that's pretty nice. Yeah, $1,000, no stress. This recent Goodwill discovery, by the way, fun little note here at the end, isn't the only surprise to make headlines in recent years. In 2018, a framed copy of a December 28, 1774 edition of the Pennsylvania Journal and Weekly Advertiser newspaper was donated to a New Jersey Goodwill store and estimated to be worth $18,000. In one unique instance, a customer bought a VCR that contained a VHS tape of a baby boy taking his first steps and was able to return it to the family using social media. So now to the real estate news, the not so good news in economics from Bloomberg via Yahoo Finance. Real estate investors desperate to spend $250 billion hoard. Investors with a record hoard of money to finance distressed commercial real estate are finding themselves in a tough spot. There's nowhere to spend it. The massive wave of defaults expected after the coronavirus shuttered offices, hotels, and stores last year has so far failed to materialize. Now, as the U.S. economy swings from pandemic lows to a vaccine and stimulus-induced rebound, the window of opportunity for discounted deals is closing before it ever really opened. That may sound like positive news to most Americans, but to a select group of investors who anticipated raking in big profits from the misfortunes of others, it's a problem. Troubled properties aren't coming to market because owners have little pressure to sell. Commercial real estate prices have held up or even risen because so much money is chasing so few deals. What? Now, how is this happening when we covered it was a year ago today, more or less, we covered the commercial real estate crisis, the plummeting prices and for sale signs popping up, and especially I remember even looking at it through the window of, the Florida coast, where tons of strip malls and other commercial properties were going on sale for much cheaper than anything prior, because all those businesses had been shut down because of COVID. Just with the shutdown, a lot of business owners said right away, we're going to stop paying rent. We're out of here. We'll bring the business back to physical reality when we're allowed to actually do business, but we're not going to try to maintain a store and staff during COVID. And what it looks like is that a lot of these American investors were behind. And I don't know, but this is like my theory, as we talked about with Ed, that if this was all profiting the Chinese, if this was really, and there certainly was. I mean, it's not a question of if there was some sort of international policy manipulation by the American government versus the Chinese government, but if the Chinese were ahead of this, even if the virus was organic, even if it didn't escape from a Wuhan lab, the way that the Chinese were able to play up the scare in anticipation of it getting to the rest of the world, they might have been better able to anticipate the sudden drop in real estate prices. And I would predict, if someone did the analysis now, that we would see a relatively sharp increase in the amount of Chinese real estate holdings in the United States, especially over the past year. Wall Street Journal with this next item. This is a very interesting headline. With negative rates, homeowners in Europe are paid to borrow. Yeah. This deserves more deconstruction and translation than we even have time to for today, but I'll do my best attempt at a quick analysis here. COVID-19 pushes benchmarks deeper into negative territory, widening the pool of mortgage holders who receive interest. Remember, when interest rates are high from central banks, that means it costs more for banks that are not the central bank and governments and other major entities that borrow directly from in the United States Federal Reserve System, the overnight lending window. That trickles down, right? And interest rates go up through mortgages being, one of the main aspects of the economy in the United States that's sensitive to interest rates. But the manipulation of interest rates when they go lower means it's easier to get that money that the central bank is putting more money out into the economy. And so the way they've got this hidden with propaganda, well, we lowered interest rates and this weird thing happened and this happened and this happened. No, what do you know? Our friends all got super, super rich. Again, the purpose of government being to help the super rich get richer at the expense of the rest of us. So what they're doing is printing more money. They're creating more money. They're flooding the market with cash. And what that always does is favor people who are closest to the source of that cash. If they have to let some trickle down, they will. And that's what this weird situation that we have in Europe is right now. So to the story, Paula Cristina Santos has a dream mortgage. The bank pays her. Her interest rate fluctuates, but right now it's around minus 0.25%. So every month, Miss Santos's lender, Banco BPI SA, deposits in her account interest on the €320,000 mortgage, equivalent to roughly $380,000 she took out in 2008. In March, she received around $45. She's still paying principal on the loan. Ms. Santos' upside-down relationship with her lender started years ago when the European Central Bank cut interest rates below zero to reignite the continent's frail economy in the midst of a sovereign debt crisis. Again, propaganda language covering the reality of we came up with an excuse to print a bunch of money. Excuse me. The negative rates helped everyone get cheap financing, from governments to small companies. It gave an incentive to households to borrow and spend, and it broke the basic rule of credit, allowing banks to owe money to borrowers. It's there's so much manipulation in this. I really don't even know where to go next in trying to deconstruct this. But we have reached one other thing to point out here that's very important is when banks are creating money like this, when interest rates are zero, near zero, or in negative territory, there is a distortion in spending. And what it does is creates a much deeper problem of concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, because poor people are not inclined to save. People who have cash, you're more likely to spend it if you know that cash is losing value. But it doesn't matter, because you spend it, you give it back to corporations. You're like, even here in America, to connect to this most recent stimulus, $1,400. Where does $1,400 get the average American? Caught up on bills. And then they pay gas to go spend money on, essential quality of life stuff that we expect to have that we might not. They go spend it on cheap Chinese stuff, plastic stuff from Walmart. Classical music. Do the ruling factions have absolute control over the market? So, of course, it's not absolute control, but they are able to control the major forces by controlling the money and controlling who has access and control of the resources, as we covered extensively in our American Empire segment. So, Mrs. Santos' case was supposed to be rare and mostly over by now after the ECB cut interest rates to below zero in 2014. Economies in the Eurozone improved, and expectations were that rates would rise in a few years. But the coronavirus pandemic changed all that. As economic pain in Europe drags on, the negative rates remain, and they are getting lower. As a result, more borrowers in Portugal, as well as in Denmark, where interest rates turned negative in 2012, are finding themselves in the unusual position of receiving interest on their loans. When I took the mortgage, I never imagined the scenario, neither did the banks, said Ms. Santos, a 44-year-old business consultant. Deco, Elizabeth, and it goes on. There's more examples of this. But another way of looking at this would be when they put out, $1,400 stimulus after everybody being so denied the right to work in many ways, shutdowns, lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have to keep the peasants fed. Let's give them a little bit of what we're stealing from everybody who's still working and productive, or is productive resources. Andy Martin, did you ever read about how the East German Stasi used a policy called breaking souls? No, I did not. I would appreciate seeing a link about that. If you want to email it, adam@thefreedomline.com, please. Excuse me. I don't know. Should I drink more water? Is that it? We're only 3/4 of the way into the show and still not to our grab bag yet. I'm waiting for the story to come up to give me an excuse to take another big bong rip, and that'll make things better, I'm sure. Reuters next at Yahoo Finance also. Exclusive, Visa moves to allow payment settlements using cryptocurrency. So yeah, good news to celebrate there, as we seem to have significant good crypto news almost every day now. Next, we go to insider.com. This is the really big one, kicking off our block on the law. Baltimore will no longer prosecute for drug possession, prostitution, or other low-level crimes after pandemic experiment success. Now, there's still one big problem with this, they say low-level crimes, not victimless crimes, but obviously when they say drug possession and prostitution, that's a really positive development because obviously low-level crimes tends to mean victimless crimes. A year ago, Baltimore stopped prosecuting low-level crimes to stop the spread of COVID-19 in jails. And oh, by the way, it had all these other great effects. On Friday, officials announced those policies would become permanent after the last year's success. Drug possession, prostitution, and urinating in public are among the crimes no longer being prosecuted. Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby announced Friday the city would no longer prosecute low-level, non-violent, so in that sense victimless, offenses after a year-long experiment during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mosby stopped prosecuting such crimes a year ago as part of the COVID criminal justice policy's effort to prevent virus transmission in jails and prisons, a move that was adopted by prosecutors in other cities as well. A year on, my computer's going to be done. So Ed, you want to cover for me while I let's get Ed back up on screen here. Co-host Ed Vallejo, ladies and gentlemen, covering for another technical difficulty this morning. My laptop's down. I thought the battery was more charged, and I got to go take a few minutes to go get the power cable. Do you want to vamp for me and we'll get back to the block, or do you want to like vamp for the last 30 minutes of the show here?
Whatever you need.
All right. Well, why don't you cover for me and talk to the audience and cover comments? And there's CJ. CJ's gonna vamp. CJ, actually, there is a transgender story that's in the file today. I don't know if you noticed this. You want to pull this up for me while I'm down here? I forget which state.
I'm going to go to t.me/Adam versus the man, which, again, Jim, if you don't mind. And I'm going to pull up the show notes, and I'll try to help you out here.
So there was a state legislature that banned underage gender reassignment surgery. Now, for the sake of conversation as libertarians, we have to separate the arbitrary nature of government policy saying you have rights that start when you turn 18 to begin with, because it should, there's no right that you have as a human being that is subject to an arbitrary time determination by government. Your rights are inherent regardless of your age. So the question is, what is an appropriate age of consent versus an age of custodianship for different things? And between a baby and a full-grown adult, we don't extend full rights to babies. Babies, because they don't assert their rights and are in a sense helpless, are considered the custodial property, and maybe property is not the right word, but considered in custodial possession of their parents or their guardians or whoever else under today's government structure is legally designated as the guardian or in loco parentis. Now, in a community setting, you could have that, without government, people just accept that, well, because that child's parents died, but then these other people adopted them, and they have, legal common law kind of guardianship. And then we have gray areas in between being a baby and being an adult in terms of your rights and guardianship, like when it comes to sex. And in the United States, we do this very poorly, where the arbitrary line of age 18 means you have sexual rights and you have the right to consent to sex, whereas before that, if you're under 18 and someone over 18 has sex with you, that older person might go to jail for that. And then we have various funny laws where, well, if there's a 2-year difference, and that kind of makes sense, right? Well, if it's a 19-year-old with a 17-year-old, we're not going to fuck with that. But if it's a 20-year-old with a 17-year-old, then you're in trouble, mister. And various versions of this where we try to say that, consent is based on arbitrary government chronological points rather than an actual meaningful, intellectual autonomy or ability to consent by the person in question.
Depending on which state you're in.
Did that open up enough of a conversation, CJ? Did you find the article? You're muted. You're so polite.
Oh, I was just gonna. Well, I got my daughter here. So I was gonna ask you which I missed the last 10 minutes here. I was hopping back in, but which block were you on here in the article so I can get to it?
This is into the law. The second, we just covered the first story in the law about.
So this is
um,
okay. Yeah, so the what is it? Epic Times,
Epoch.
Epoch Times. Okay, gotcha.
There it
Thanks,
is.
Jim. Thanks, Jim. This is
Arkansas.
just like having an executive producer, huh? All right. So yeah, so this is in Arkansas. Ban on gender transition procedures for minors passes Arkansas Senate. Bills headed to governor's desk. That's kind of like in South Dakota. Governor Kristi Noem just did a edit and revision veto of a bill that was passed that would essentially ban transgender people from competing in sports that are not of the gender they were born as. And she sent that back for a revision. And it's called a revision and edit veto. Have you ever heard of this? I've never heard of this. So her legal scholars that she's been talking to say it's within her right to send it back for a.
Well, sir, in that legal framework, a governor or president could just veto and then attach a note to their veto and send or make a speech and tell Congress, I want to sign this, but it needs these changes, please.
Right, and in this case, it's because of the NAACP. I just did what she did. So on her show with her interview with Tucker Carlson, she kept saying, NCAA, and she almost said NAACP 3 different times in this interview. And I'm just doing it here because she already put that in my brain. Like, okay, I think she kind of showed her real agenda on that interview with Tucker Carlson. But okay, so the NCAA is going to sue the state of South Dakota if they don't allow transgendered people to play in their sports systems. And so she's saying that she can't have the law say that the adults can't go play in sports like this, and regardless of your sexual whatever, as long as you're an adult, you can go play in this. And that's what the NCAA is saying, that they'll sue South Dakota for if this passes. But they can't do nothing about high school and below. So she's saying that she'll keep that transgendered people will have to play in the sport that they were born as until a college would then essentially pick them up and allow them to meet the criteria for having transitioned in order to play in the other gendered sport. Yeah, it's crazy. I've been watching this transgender bills being pushed all across the country, but that really goes to speak, I would say, a lot to the power of the Libertarian Party, because I remember sitting there listening to transgender issues for hours on end at the national convention. So, I mean, maybe this is some libertarians pushing some bills in Arkansas, and they're getting some ground, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you raised the issue of athletics, and I didn't realize how connected that was to the story in South Dakota. But the athletics issue to me is kind of a boring one. It gets to the question, like, what is the point of your sport? Is it to categorize humans by gender and say who are the best at this sport and this gender? And if so, then you define gender, and it's based on the audience. I mean, what professional sports are a show. Like what is it really? It's a form of entertainment, and there's a lot more to it than that. But as a business, they're entertainment, but not at the school level, not at the community level, where there's a different purpose. And if you want to be inclusive, you decide whatever your criteria are. Ed?
My question is, what does the NCAA have against the Special Olympics? That's my question. What do they have against them? I mean, they are devaluing the Special Olympics completely by allowing transgender people to compete against non-transgender people. Okay, you have sports. Okay, there are male sports events and female sports events. Now, if somebody is debilitated. Let's say they've been born developmentally disabled, or they're mentally retarded or whatever, but they have enough wherewithal that they want to compete in this sport. They compete in the Special Olympics.
Uh-oh.
Okay? They don't compete against non-impaired people. Okay. Well, what's the difference here? I mean, if someone decides they want to leave,
Are you trying to call being born a woman a birth defect or something?
No, if someone wants to leave their natal gender, that's their right, but that should just devalue their ability to participate in sports against non-gender people. They should have a Special Olympics where they can compete against other people who have done the same, and then we can see which is the best transgender.
Okay, before the transgender community gets up in arms and says that Ed's basically saying that they're the equivalent of needing a Special Olympics category, what's being said here, at least from the government's perspective, to the legislature. So the governor saying to the legislature, I can sign it under these terms. I can't sign under this, and she says it straight up. She's like, we'll lose this fight. We will lose this fight. The NCAA will win this argument because they've set the criteria for their sport that says if you meet these qualifications, these are what categories you can compete in. And yes, Ed, they're not going to let somebody with no legs run the 500-meter dash unless they are in a category that they qualify to do so. We've seen paraplegics running in marathons. I mean, there's all kinds of examples out there of sport being inclusive. So in letting the government dictate this outside of into adulthood, is crossing into a realm of government I don't want to go into.
Well, so CJ, let me.
What they're saying is 18 and under, they can regulate that sport as government and say you will participate in the sport of your gender at birth in this state. That's what they're saying.
So generally speaking, as libertarians, we can all agree that when it comes to sports, government should have nothing to do with it. Let the market decide, let the participants decide. As long as it's consensual at every level, you're not forcing people to participate, you're not forcing people not to participate, whatever it is. There's freedom of association and disassociation and respect for individual rights across the board. We can have male birth only, we can have identified male only, we can have community college intramural leagues where boys and girls play together and it doesn't matter. Or you could even have a trans only league. You could have men on estrogen and women on testosterone. If that's what people want, let the market decide. But what this story gets to is a deeper issue that does challenge libertarian ethics to be applied more precisely. And that's what, all this aside, this is all secondary to what I wanted to get into here, which is at what point is there consent? At what point can you, and it's sort of like, let's start with assisted suicide as an example. And I don't mean to compare transitioning to suicide, but it's an irreversible procedure. When is it okay to assist someone with suicide? When they're really drunk and angry because you got them on drugs and they're not themselves, is it okay to help them kill themselves? No, absolutely not. But if someone is completely sane and present and in pain and suffering from a chronic disease and they want to say their goodbyes and check out, then fuck yeah, that's an honorable thing to assist them in suicide. So similarly, with someone who knows, and I'm not going to judge here. I think there are a lot of people, I will say, being pushed into transitioning for whom it's going to be bad for. And this is why there are, challenges with suicide rates, or one of the reasons. We need 3 categories: cis male, cis female, and co-ed. Yeah. All right. So
I'm not going to argue with Mercedes on that one. I'm not going to argue.
But it's if you need so Mercedes, anybody who says we need that is making a suggestion to the market based on their own preferences and what they would support, participate in, or pay to watch, right? So that's your own preference. That's great. Some people want that, and I think enough people feel like Mercedes that we will continue to support a huge diversity of athletic organizations with diversity of criteria as we have today. We get government out of the way. We get to see more diversification. We get to see market needs met better And I'm a fan of athletics, of sport. Not of professional sports, not really, not much, but I do want to see the human activity of sport optimized. So that being said, the age of consent thing, when is it okay to help someone transition in an irreversible way? And this is where, going back to this, to how I set this subject up, we have various degrees of consent based on someone's age, where a baby basically has no rights up to a fully sovereign adult who has all rights. Whereas, we have that issue with sexual consent. At what point are you capable of consenting to sex without it being a form of statutory rape? And that's really the wrong term for it. It's really, at what age can we say for certain that an older person is taking advantage of a younger person, that they are too young to understand and therefore incapable of consent, at which point it is obviously a form of child abuse.
Right. Yeah.
How do those criteria apply to the transgender issue with children?
Right. So, Jim, if you would please, in the Producers Club chat, I just shared a link. It's just one of the top search results for Google. I think the government has already provided the language and law needed for this conversation, and that's emancipation laws. And so, it's basically state statutes governing the release of minors from legal guardianship of their parents are called emancipation laws. So here's what it says on this website, at least. State statutes governing the release of minors from legal guardianship of their parents are called emancipation laws. Emancipation may be granted to minors who are, for example, able to provide their ability to support themselves, have made arrangements for housing, are able to make decisions for themselves, or show sufficient maturity. This subsection includes a concise overview of emancipation laws and the minor emancipation process, an explanation on how certain events may trigger the automatic emancipation of a minor, summaries of law of more significant state emancipation requirements, a primer on the legal rights of children, and related information. So I put that in the show notes there, and that's what I believe is the answer in this case, at least government to population speaking, that there's a process for you no longer to be identified as a child and be identified as an adult. There's benchmarkers of responsibility in your life that you can show a court that can say, hey, Your Honor, I'm a YouTube channel host that just plays video games all day. I make $150,000 a year. I bought the house next door to my parents. I want my rights. And if you could show a judge that you are essentially more responsible than some adults, then you would technically fall under some.
See, that gets to if I may sidebar a little bit, for all of us, that is sort of the source of our rights, is our.
That's what I would tell my child.
Our demanding.
I have children, so I have my 10-year-old come down to me and said, "Daddy, I'm moving out. I want to be an adult." I'd be like, "Whoa, player. How much money do you make a month?" And for example, last night, if I asked my daughter, I said, what would you do if you got kicked out right now and you were on the street? How much money do you have ready to go? And it was, her answer was a little over $400, right? And I was like, you know what? I mean, to be honest, Adam, I spent $400 before I think I woke up this morning. So, I mean, to me, it's like, okay, if you were out to the wind right now, you would most likely die.
Right.
But if you're a 17-year-old, who, can, in other words, I mean, qualify to join the military, there's a way for you, right, even as a 17-year-old.
You've really decisively answered part of this question with the emancipation point. That if you're at the point of emancipation, and a doctor can pay for something and you're sober and you want it, then you have the right to make whatever irreversible medical decisions you want for yourself. But is there ever a time before that where a parent might do that in their child's best interest? And I'll give you a couple of tricky examples here. There are children babies born with ambiguous genitalia. And often doctors end up making the decision and parents go along with, well, we're going to cut this or snip this and it's going to end up like this because your baby's this, and we're going to make it more standardized down there. Then there's another one, CJ, to put it in the example of your children. Well, if one of you, if a 10-year-old came and said, I want to move out, I got $400, you'd say, no, I'm not, no, I'm going to stop that from happening. And that would be an appropriate custodial limitation of rights to say, no, I don't take your expression seriously. But you would, if they say, I don't want to eat this, I want to eat this. At some point, you do respect their preferences in deciding what they put in their own body to a certain degree, right? So there's a graduating level from, you know, completely helpless baby to the age of or the point of maturity of emancipation, and this gets tricky in a lot of ways. So would it ever be appropriate for a parent to do that in the best interest of their child before the age of emancipation? Because there already is a situation where you do, as a parent, make irreversible medical decisions for that sub-emancipation age.
Well,
Wait. Emancipation is a false Band-Aid. Okay, you may think of it as a cure or a compromise or whatever it is, but it's still giving power of the state over the individual. Your child is not your own. He has to come to the state in order to say, am I free? I want to say I'm free. Okay.
Right. No, Ed, we're presuming here that there's the state criteria that CJ read out as code there, but there's also a natural law equivalent. So when I say age, you know, that age of emancipation, of that maturity, I'm referring to both. So again, in a sense,
that may have been correct up to a point, but we're in a different time, sir. We're in the third millennium here, where words don't mean what they used to. Definitions aren't the same. The lines are all being blurred. Okay, there is no specific age where you could say this is the same for everybody. No, it's all being blurred and tailored to the individual to strike the parameters, and before you know it, everybody is doing that which is right in their own eyes.
Well, you know what the actual natural law age of emancipation is? It's the point at which you can run away and stay away.
The laws in Hawaii were, if you could touch Hawaiian soil, you were a free person.
All right, so CJ, to this consent with gender transitioning, is it ever, because there could be a point at which, and gender transitioning is different from like ambiguous genitalia, or, you know, like do we cut the leg off or try to save it, you know, if it's mangled in an accident kind of decisions. So by that, do you say that the desire, like the choice to die by suicide, is something that until you're at the age of consent or the age of majority, that you don't have the right, and society shouldn't support you making irreversible medical decisions for yourself that way?
Well, you know, Adam, the take of suicide, by at least the government's words, is that suicide is a criminal act. So, you know, at the end of the day, they do that so they can seize your assets after your death. I mean, there's the law, the way it's written, it is because we have a government, okay? And whether we like to admit it or not, we are all surrounded by said government. And in different states, they do different language. And Ed, you're right, they've twisted the language pretty crazy. But again, going back to this issue, I mean, I have a baby on the way, due here in July. I mean, regardless of what genitalia my baby would be born with, I'm still going to love my child, you know. But I know as a parent, this life is going to be in my hands, and I am responsible, at least in the government's eyes, until this child turns now 18, which was decided before you and I were born. And we've seen laws change, smoking ages changed. You know, we've seen things in our lifetime where the government moves the goalposts on age of things. And so really, I mean, in South Dakota, a 14-year-old can get a driver's license, you know, but before, like I was talking with Cash Jackson yesterday, my dad grew up driving a semi by the time, you know, he was, you know, 10, 11 years old. So, I mean, different generations had different, understandings of raising children. And I mean, to grow up on a farm back then, you would be, driving the harvest in a semi to the elevator, and you were 12 years old, like shifting gears. Like, I mean, you would never see a miner doing that today because they realize that miner safety dictates that maybe 12-year-olds shouldn't be driving semis. So the government always moves the goalposts on every subject when it comes to parental and children's rights. And where I will always say this, my right to tell my daughter to go to bed will always supersede her right to tell me she has a snack. She needs a snack. So you can take a nap first, and then we'll talk about the snack.
All right. Well, on that note, I just want to add one more thing. Thank you for joining us for the segment, CJ. And I want to get that comment back up, that question there. With this concept of a spectrum of rights that you gain in the assertion of them is why I believe in animal rights, why I'm a vegetarian pretty strictly, at least consumer choice, I should say. If someone else is serving, really consumer choice vegan when I can. But I believe that for the same reason that you respect that, even though that baby is completely helpless and in a state of being in the custodianship of an adult, that it is asserting a desire to be alive and therefore has a right to be alive. But I would say the same thing is true about animals, and to the greatest extent we practically can, that should be respected. So this is a great question from Classical Music. Should a community be able to decide they do not want doctors to perform certain procedures within their community? And that's a great question about consent and market forces, because leave it out. I always want to parse apart the language until I'm done answering the question, because should the community decide is not really the way to ask the question. The first question is, are certain procedures immoral, right? So is it unethical for a doctor to perform gender reassignment surgery on a 5-year-old? I think we safely can say, yeah, that's immoral. Or to give a tattoo to a drunk person, or an elective surgery to someone that they chose when they were under the influence in some way. There are clearly certain procedures that are unethical, no matter what, for a doctor to perform, even with the consent of the patient in that sense. So the question, should a community be able to decide? Really, should market forces be brought to bear on doctors doing unethical things? Abso-fucking-lutely. They should be out of business. They should be held accountable. They should not be supported by the market. And in this case, you say the community around them that supports, local practices, individual doctors. Should they decide to do that? It's not be able to decide, but they should withdraw their business in such a way as to not support anybody doing anything unethical. And so that extends further on to every aspect of the market. But to put it in these terms, yes, a community should be able to decide through their market interactions whether or not doctors would be allowed. But it's not whether they're allowed. See, that's the thing is, that language of allow is not what the market does. It's the market sort of tolerates or supports. And should the market support unethical behavior by doctors? Absolutely not. So that answers that question, I think, decisively. Ed, do you want to declare a winner for your comment contest today?
I guess it's going to be John Smith.
All right. Congratulations, John Smith. Do you remember the comment it was for?
Yeah, he said that Lil Nas is coming out with a new crypto coin called Pitcoin, and he says it has value in this life and the next.
All right. Well, Jim, one more link to pull up from the grab bag today. You see the headline there about cannabis from Daily Mail. Let's pull that up on screen, and I'll read that. I told you I had another one. I've been waiting for this story. We're going to go over a minute or two today, just to make sure that we have an excuse to end with a bong rip. Jim, get yourself and that Daily Mail story up on screen here. What are they smoking? Scientists claim people who regularly smoke cannabis are just as likely to exercise as non-users. The stereotype propagated in film and society is that cannabis users are lazy. Researchers from University of Miami analyzed data to see if this is true, found no link between activity level and that of cannabis use and frequency. Experts say their finding discredits the inaccurate trope about stoners. Say lawmakers should consider this finding when looking at the potential legislation of the drug. And with that, let's take some COVID vitamins, shall we?
Smoke weed every day. I didn't have it ready today. My bad.
Well, thanks for trying, Jim. It's been a fun show. Let's do the promos. Take us home.
Okay, I can come back on and do the promos here. Whoops, I guess I still had that up. I was so excited to see the good news about pot people.
Yeah, that's the good news to end on. And I'll say one other thing about that story. Cannabis is a fun indulgence in a lot of ways. And there are people who are lazy who do smoke pot as part of being lazy. And I think, if anything, that would tilt the statistics towards the trope described in the story. Whereas if you're just, if it's not that for you, in order to counter that statistically, I would suggest that cannabis actually encourages physical activity. You know, we used to do the hashtag lit and fit on the campaign trail because, you know, me and Joey Lee, G.I. Mary Jane, we get stoned and go to the gym together. Right? Like, and that's like, I still like, I can't really, I mean, I do a lot of manual, well, I'm stoned on manual labor out here too. But like working out, lifting weights, I'm going to get stoned and listen to music and lift weights, you know, and going for a run is that much more fun when you're high, like when you smoke a little weed. And so I think, if anything, in conscientious use, the other thing they found, this is an older study we cited years ago, is that average cannabis users have slimmer waistlines than non-users.
I can attest to that.
Jim, if you can't tell from the shot he's in right now, is lean as fuck. Like, do you know your body fat percentages, Jim?
What's that?
Yeah, right. Okay, so
I don't know.
I'm in the, like, I cruise in the 10 to 12 range and look pretty good. Like, you can see my abs and some muscle definition. Jim's got less muscle mass and more definition, like striations that show. I would guess from that you're like in the 7-8% body fat range, something
Maybe,
like that.
Yeah, I'm under 10 somewhere.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Probably 5, maybe. I'd say, and I mean, it's intentional. There's a couple different ways you can work out. There's powerlifting and there's strength lifting. You know what I mean? Like, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, lifting super heavy weight, maxing out as much as you can, is going to build your body mass up, make you bigger like you. But lifting relatively smaller weights and doing 1,000,000 reps is gonna just chisel you down instead of building you a larger
Not necessarily. I'm kind of glad you brought that up, and so let me. That's a common misunderstanding of workout physiology that's easy to clarify, because the way that you work your muscles can determine if you build slow twitch or fast twitch. But you can have big muscles and like, I don't do one, like I'm pretty built at 5'10" and 220 and around 12% body fat, and I do mostly manual labor, and when I lift weights, I don't know if you've actually seen me lift weights, I do kind of medium rep range. I never do 1 rep maxes. I never go, like, it's been years since I've even ever intentionally done a set of less than 4 reps, and I'm usually more like in the 8 to 12 rep range, and I do a lot of higher rep warm up, and workup sets going into it, and so I'm able to build a variety of muscles that way, or muscle fibers, the fast twitch and slow twitch, that whole spectrum, and with manual labor that I get cardio with, I feel like I'm sort of hitting it from all angles except that 1 rep max side. I'm kind of cutting out that extreme, although I get a little bit of that in manual labor, like every now and then we got to lift a heavy stump, and it's like, yep, that was a good deadlift 1 rep max,
Right.
But that's pretty rare. I don't do much of that. And in terms of getting chiseled or defined, doing more reps doesn't necessarily do that by building the fast or slow twitch muscle fibers. Slow twitch meaning they work over slower time. They're better on longer endurance. And there's still a lot of misunderstanding about this in exercise physiology and exactly over what curve, where this applies in the numbers. But you could be doing a lot of high rep exercises and still have a ton of body fat and not show any muscle at all. But you have, the assumption there and the misunderstanding sometimes comes from if you're doing a lot of high rep stuff, you tend to be burning more calories. So if you're stimulating the muscles and burning a ton of calories, and the other major difference is you're depleting your glycogen stores more thoroughly. Glycogen is your stored carbohydrate in your muscle where that you burn while you're burning. So you're doing a lot of things when you're working muscles, but you're using your glycogen stores. This is why you have like for me, I know that if I'm doing like manual labor, I got to keep eating during the day. I got to eat more and I got to eat more carby foods and sugars. And I don't gain weight if I'm doing, 8-10 hours a day of manual labor. I'm not doing a lot of like my muscles don't, they'll last all day, but my glycogen won't. Whereas like if I'm at the gym, I can max out my muscles and my glycogen. I'll feel after like an hour and a half. And I never lift weights for more than an hour and a half. But sometimes, I a lot less than that, and being hurried more recently in my life, a lot of times if you take out my warm ups and other time at the gym, my actual time lifting weights on a targeted muscle group might only be 30 minutes or less, and that might be a third of my body if I'm doing pushing, pulling legs. But I know that if I go like about an hour 15 of consistently lifting weights of doing, unless it's just arms, but I wouldn't work arms for that long. But if I'm doing an hour 15 of composite lifts that are using large parts of my body or engaging my core, about an hour 15 I start to feel the glycogen depletion. That's the energy crash. That's muscles getting tired, not weak. So the other thing is that you're tearing the muscle fibers, right? And they're regenerating, and the healing is what makes you stronger overnight or over a couple of days of healing. So if you go out and like what I do when I lift, I do a little heavy stuff. Occasionally I get into the 6 rep range, but like I said, never less than that intentionally. And a lot of what I do is more in the 10 plus rep range. I'm getting a lot of and the main reason I avoid the low rep is you're injury prone and it's not very time efficient. Spend a lot of time thinking about and engaging and, working up and being very careful and precise and technique. And you're much more likely to get strains and sprains. Bodybuilders don't do 1 rep max stuff. The way I lift is a little more typical of a bodybuilder than a power lifter who's going to focus on that 1 rep max because that's the performance aspect that they're competing on. I don't care about my 1 rep max. I'm not in some kind of dick measuring contest out here. I want to be healthy. I want to look good, and I want to have a functional body for the work that I want to do and how I want to live and to be able to enjoy life. And so that's the overall approach. And I know now we're like way over time. But does that clarify that myth?
A little bit. Yeah. I didn't really know that. I never really got that deep into it, but I guess maybe it's just my, my genes or whatever. It's just my natural physiology.
Your diet too. The way and your main source of physical activity is manual labor with your job, where you're
right.
You're lifting heavy shit. You're doing full body, moderate muscle strenuous, moderate cardio. I would say some strenuous muscle work mixed in, but over the course of hours at a time, right? And
dude,
so
yesterday, you see how our yard is all rocks?
Yeah.
We took a yard like ours. It was a front yard though, and took out all their rocks. So that involves scooping them with a big, huge snow shovel, and they had some big boulders in there. So shovels full of rocks. They're probably I don't know, I guess 30, 40 pounds each and hauling them over and into the trailer, you know what I mean? A couple
Yeah.
hundred times for a whole yard's worth of rocks and then raking it. Yeah.
So I mean
Definitely
that's
physically involved.
well, it's yeah, you get that full glycogen depletion, in a few hours of labor like that. And you notice like when you're doing it, I mean, you've done a few days of like full day work with me out here where you have to stop and eat.
Oh yeah.
And you got to eat high carb shit when you're doing that. It's good you want to eat healthy, whole natural carbs like, natural starches, I guess. I'm not trying to give dietary advice, but
this is not dietary information.
This is definitely misleading medical advice. And everything I just told you will totally get you COVID. And with that, Jim, let's do the promotions.
Okay, all right. So if you want to add your 2 cents in, first I guess I should go to the banner and mention. We always mention the public channel that everybody is welcome to. So everybody watching this show right now can just go to t.me/Adam versus the man. That's our public Telegram chat room for the show, so you can participate and have fun with that. If you want to be like the winner of our contest today and win access into the private Producers Club, you can go to the website at the bottom of the screen, adamversusman.com. It's a beautiful website, being updated all the time. We even got Homefront Battle Buddies in there right now. We'll get to that later. First, we're going to show you the Patreon, and that's where you can gain access. You can bypass the contest and just buy your way straight into the Producers Club at $10 per month at patreon.com. So check that out. It's definitely where it's at. The private chat is the best thing in the world. Cigar Federation is our other affiliate program, also on the website. You see, I just clicked the back button on my browser to go right back to the website that you should have bookmarked in your favorites in your browser. Click on Cigar Federation. Check out all of their exotically flavored cigars for you to choose from, and use promo code ADAM10 at checkout to get yourself 10% off of anything you purchase there. Your entire order. They got a huge selection, delicious cigars. Many of them have been smoked right here on the show, so definitely check those out. After that, click your back button again, go right back to the best website on the planet. Check out Homefront Battle Buddies website, because there's now a link on there. Oh, never mind. Don't do that. I shouldn't have done that. You guys should have warned me. It's almost ready. It's on its way. It's coming. Check out the shop is what I meant to say. CJ's got a bunch of cool shit on there. Backpacks, t-shirts, everything with the Adam versus the Man logo or the Freedom logo. Your choice. Put it together. Get yourself some merch. Be awesome like everybody that has previously done so. After that, last thing I want to tell you about is going to Instagram at the Garden of Freedom. You can check out everything that's been going on with Adam up there in Gardenia. He just adopted a couple new puppies, a Rottweiler and Pitbull mix. Absolutely beautiful. You're going to see plenty of pictures of them growing up all over this Instagram. So get yourself involved with that. And there you go.
Peace and love, y'all. Choose happiness and be excellent to each other.